Sadly, I can no longer play this game without thinking of Conan O'Brien. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, check out his Clueless Gamer segment on this game. You'll know what I'm talking about then. Hello everyone, Davey here, and in honor of the release of the definitive edition of Tomb Raider for the next generation of consoles, here I am to review the reboot of Tomb Raider from 2013 by Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics that has Lara Croft being stranded on an island, and now it's up to her to not only survive but also find her friends in order to get off the island while at the same time solving its various mysterious secrets. Now this is the obligatory, greedier, much more brutal, M-rated, revamp, reboot, whatever you decide to call it, of Tomb Raider that's supposed to be a little more realistic in terms of its approach to the character of Tomb Raider that we've known since the 90s with the PlayStation era, and it does an awesome job. But one cannot help but compare this game to the Uncharted franchise, which is really weird and kind of odd to do considering that Uncharted was kind of inspired by the original Tomb Raider, so it's kind of like they're mimicking each other at this point, and there's almost no use in arguing the fact because they just borrowed from each other, and they're great games, so there's no point in fighting over them. But regardless of which one you think has the higher quality, you gotta admit that there's several mechanics and gameplay tropes in Tomb Raider that are very reminiscent of the Uncharted franchise. That's not to say that they didn't do them very well, because they actually did. Now the story, I'll admit, is a little generic. Somebody gets stranded on an island, and now it's up to them to survive against the elements. But then it is when they're exploring the island that they discover that there's something amiss, something possibly supernatural, which, you know, like I said, it's kind of reminiscent of not only Uncharted, but it dates back to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And the same thing could go for some of the characters in this game, especially some of the supporting cast. They're somewhat types. But what Tomb Raider has going for it is that because you got this template that is somewhat suitable for a reboot, that gives you leeway to focus on the characters and make them likable and write them well, so that when things start to happen, whether they're supernatural or just plain bad, you care. And you actually get emotionally invested in the story, regardless of how generic it may be. And that's where Tomb Raider got it right, because Lara Croft herself is so sympathetic. She's a little naive because she wants to go out exploring and, like she says, make her mark, but you can easily tell that when she gets shipwrecked on the island, she is way over her head. But she focuses and she becomes sensible of what's around her, so that she develops her instincts in order to be able to survive, and that makes the character so likable and so relatable that you just want to just root for her. And she is one of the most empowering female protagonists I've seen in a video game for some time. More so than its short-wearing, big-breasted counterpart. And even though I said that some of the supporting characters are somewhat types of this kind of genre, they're still likable in their own way. Especially Lara's mentor, Roth. He was pretty cool. And there's this other character, I believe his name was Alex. He was just a really cool character to see. On the other side of the spectrum, the characters that you're supposed to hate, the main antagonists, you hate. And they were done really well. Even though some of them were, especially one in particular, was, in my opinion, just a tad bit melodramatic. But still, they were intimidating. So when things get thrown Lara Croft's way that are incredibly brutal and vicious, not only do you feel intimidated by these bad guys, but you feel for Lara and feel for the things that she has to go through when she navigates through this island. Now with that said, I will admit that there's certain points where I did feel the need to suspend my disbelief somewhat when it came to Lara facing some of these obstacles, especially when she gets wounded and she somehow manages to carry on by simply just bonding her wound together with some rags, but without any sort of antibiotics or alcohol of any kind. I'm pretty sure that after all the time that she spent on this island with that wound, that thing could have gotten infected. But one of the things about the story that I found kind of odd for me personally would have to be the thing that almost every other critic of the game thought was a little iffy, and that would be the first kill. Lara obviously has to not take it very well when it comes to killing the first human being that she has to in order to survive. And it's a very pivotal point in the story because that's the approach that Square Enix wanted to take with Tomb Raider, and that is a much more realistic approach. So obviously Lara needed to have that kind of reaction when it came to killing her first human being and taking a life. I mean, it's never easy to take somebody's life. Even though I'm not saying that from first-hand experience, but I'm just saying I can totally imagine not being able to do it, only to have to do it in order to be able to survive. So it was a very important thing that Square Enix needed to get right, which I believe they did, not only through the writing of Lara Croft's character, but also the performance given by the actress, whose name I unfortunately cannot remember. I can't remember. It's a little bit exotic. I know that she's British, and she doesn't look very much like Lara, but she still delivered a really great performance that, like I said, made me feel for Lara. However, the thing that a lot of critics didn't like was the fact that right after that first skill, and after having such an emotional reaction to it, she pulls out her bow and arrow and starts killing a bunch of guys, no problem. But the funny thing is that didn't really bother me so much for two reasons. One, I already knew about it because I unfortunately watched/read a couple of reviews here and there before I actually played this game back in March. And the second reason is because it's still a video game, so I'm still gonna have to kill these guys that are coming at me and get over that emotional scene just as much as Lara did. Now, if it was a movie in which I didn't take any part of, that would be a completely different story. But one of the other things that the story has going for it is that it utilizes the island very well. It tells the mysterious background of the island and uses it very effectively. Which brings me to my next point, is that this island is so well designed. It's just gorgeous to look at. This was one of those games. This was one of those games for me in which I actually had to stop whatever I was doing and look around, because the graphics and the presentation of this game are through the roof. I could not begin to fathom how well designed this island is, from the tombs to the different caves to the outdoors to the jungles to the forest to everything. It's just so well designed, and the graphics hold up very well. I can hardly find any sort of technical glitches in the game, unless you were to count Lara's rather freakishly high jump. She's got good lower body strength. But them squats though. Now the gameplay is filled with several well-balanced action-adventure mechanics that are kind of reminiscent of the Uncharted franchise, especially some of the more cinematic set pieces. Although I gotta admit, some of those cinematic set pieces started to get just a little bombastic by the end, where things got just a little Michael Bay proportion size that I was like, okay guys, we get it. Explosions. But then the game would use the camera angles during those set pieces to really trigger a really suspenseful vibe to some of these set pieces. One in particular where you have to escape a cavern, and the camera gets real close next to Lara, and it's like you can barely see anything, and I'm just pressing the stick up in order to be able to run up towards the light, and it was very intense, and it delivered a really great vibe. And I'm not really kidding when I said that some of the mechanics mimic those of Uncharted. You got platforming, you got obstacle and or puzzle solving, you got shootouts in which you have to use various weapons, including guns and the trademark bow and arrow, which I will give the game credit for making me want to use the bow and arrow more so than the weapons. This is actually one of the first games that actually made me use the bow and arrow more so than guns, than pistols, than machine guns. And if the game hadn't sold you on how brutal and savage of a reboot this is, whenever those guns or that bow and arrow give out and fail to keep you safe and end up getting you killed, some of the death scenes in this game are pretty graphic, which in turn only make the bad guys all the more intimidating. Now the game comes with an upgrade and crafting system, and the upgrade system is very reminiscent of the Arkham games, in which you don't so much level up as you simply just gain a certain amount of XP, and when you reach a certain point of XP, you gain an experience point that you can then use to unlock a certain ability, whether it be to regenerate your health faster and take less damage, or be able to use your axe in a way you haven't done before. And the salvage system is basically what it is. You take the salvage parts that you find throughout the island and you're able to use them to modify your weapons to make them stronger. And I found both systems to be quite useful throughout the game, helping me build a stronger Lara. And of course, an action-adventure game is not complete without the collectibles that are scoured throughout the island, from the journal entries to the tombs that you get to raid on your spare time, adding some really good replay value to the game. So overall, Tomb Raider is definitely a riveting... Oh, that's right. Multiplayer. And you guessed it, multiplayer is... Actually, multiplayer is not bad, but it's not really good either. Basically, you take the blandest template of a multiplayer component to a game, and you just tack it onto Tomb Raider. That's practically what they did, because by the end of multiplayer, after having played through all the modes, which are all the basic modes that you come across with any multiplayer, deathmatch or team deathmatch, capture the flag, or at least their variation of that, this offensive defensive kind of mode in which one team has to attack the other while the others defend whatever it is that the other team has to capture and take back. And then you got free-for-all. Everybody kill each other. And it's not bad. It's not a bad multiplayer component, but by the end of it, not only did it feel unnecessary, but it didn't do anything new. It didn't bring anything new to the table. But of course, one of the best things about any multiplayer component is the fact that you don't have to play it in order to still have, like I said, a riveting and engaging experience in the single player. And the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot delivered just that, with an amazing character in Lara Croft and a beautifully designed island that I just couldn't get enough of, and various gameplay mechanics that really engaged me in the action-adventure feel that this game proudly delivered, despite having a somewhat generic story with generic characters and a multiplayer mode that, even though it wasn't offensive, kind of makes me worry about the gaming industry. I mean, to what extent are game developers going to shove multiplayer down our throats? But earlier this year, I find it kind of weird that some people were talking Game of the Year when it came to Tomb Raider, but after playing it, I can definitely see why. I give Tomb Raider a 9 out of 10. I mean, how much more gorgeous can Lara and the island get? Well, the definitive version is supposed to prove that, so we'll find out. But thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed my review of Tomb Raider and would like to purchase the game, be sure to use the link in the description. It would really help me out a lot. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more videos coming soon, and as always, take care. I will see you guys on the next one.